Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. The regional and global dynamics are changing, and they're changing rapidly. There are new developments in the region, and there are new developments globally. There is going to be a new administration in the White House, and probably they're going to continue with the foreign policy of Democrats, obviously. But the question is that would there be a continuity of the Trump foreign policy in the next upcoming administration? Because people related to Joe Biden's cabinet or the people close to him have said that the United States is going to keep some sort of presence in Afghanistan. This is going to be interesting because when we talk about Afghanistan, we still see that the security situation in Afghanistan is fragile. Terrorist organizations have been operating openly in Afghanistan. ISIS has targeted many civilians, innocent people in Afghanistan as well as in Pakistan. Jamaat-ul-Ahrar, Hizb-ul-Ahrar and TTP are operating in Afghanistan. Recently, Pakistani officials came up with a dossier that was presented to United Nations Secretary General and to other dignitaries as well about the Indian involvement, subversive activities in Afghanistan, and the way India has been financing and supporting these terrorist organizations, primarily TTP, Jamaat-ul-Ahrar and Hizb-ul-Ahrar in Afghanistan. And also Pakistan brought up this issue that we need to thwart, we need to stop these terrorist organizations supported and financed by India operating in Afghanistan. The question is that would the new US administration take up this issue with the Afghan government? The Afghan government has said, all the officials have been on record saying that probably they are not being able to assert much pressure, let's say, or writ of the state in various parts of Afghanistan. They can't do much about it. The question is, we have to do something about it. The region has to do something about it, about the security situation in Afghanistan, and that also Pakistan does not want the Afghan soil to be used against Pakistan. This is one thing. So primarily today we are going to discuss about a couple of things. First of all, the security situation in Afghanistan, Pakistan's foreign policy, Pakistan's strategy about it, and also another big development this week that Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is attending the 47th OIC Foreign Ministers meeting in Niger and Niamey, and there he met various foreign ministers and dignitaries. Kashmir was brought up by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi with his meeting with the Secretary General of OIC. Both discussed about Kashmir, and OIC's Secretary General said that his special envoy visited Azad Jammu and Kashmir and the Indian occupied Kashmir earlier this year, and the report of the envoy to OIC Secretary General would be presented to the OIC, and that would be made public, of course. So Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has brought up the issue of Kashmir. That was also the agenda, Pakistan's agenda at OIC. At OIC, there were 4 points primarily that were discussed, 5 points. First of all, the Islamophobia. This is a big issue for Pakistan and for the Muslim countries. That was discussed at OIC. Second was Palestine. Third was Kashmir, as Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said before leaving for the OIC meeting. And the fourth thing was COVID-19, which is a challenge for the Muslim world, for the Muslim countries. We are going to discuss about all these things today in our special show with our special guest. We are joined by Dr. Huma Bakai, renowned senior academic and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. Welcome to the program, Dr. Huma. We are also joined by Brigadier retired Qamar Salim Qamar Butt, renowned senior analyst and expert on Pakistan's national security. We are also joined by Mr. Hamid Al-Mashriqi. He is an expert on international relations. I welcome you all. I'll start with Brigadier Salim Butt. So talking about this issue, first of all, I'll start with the dossiers that we have presented to United Nations. We have presented to Afghan envoy as well. SAPM, Mohd Yusuf met the Afghan ambassador as well, and he brought up this issue of Afghan soil being used against Pakistan. The Indian dossiers, how do you see the impact of handing over these dossiers to different officials and dignitaries around the world?
Thank you very much, Taimur. The handing over of dossier on Indian subversive activities inside Pakistan, especially using the soil of our neighbor Afghanistan with almost 66 camps raw operated camps there and 21 camps operating in India. So this, I think, stemmed from that press conference where our Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and DGISPR, they gave the details on the media, and the same details are now carried in this dossier, which was also handed over to UN Secretary General by our Ambassador Munir Akram there, and again in the OIC meeting with the Secretary General, again the same dossier has been given. It has given Pakistan some diplomatic leverage in exposing the real fastest face of India. India is actually at the same strategy that they started in mid-60s in Agartala when they were executing a covert war in former East Pakistan, now called Bangladesh. You remember that RAW was created in 1968, and that was the start of Mukti Bani training in Agartala. They had recruited 100,000 Bengalis who were called Mujib's Mukti Bani, and then they took almost 3 years to execute Indian subversive war unleashed in Pakistan. So India has been publicly saying to Ajit Doval, by Modi, by Sushma Swaraj, who is no more in the world, that they are going to do this in Pakistan. They are going to turn Balochistan into Kashmir, and they are going to separate Balochistan from Pakistan. So all these kind of silly assertions have been officially made. So whatever India has been doing sabotage activities in Karachi, in Balochistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan, in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, all these details have been shared with all friendly countries, and especially on the international forums like UNO and OIC. I think they give Pakistan a lot of diplomatic advantage in exposing India. But having said that, as long as those concerns are not translated into some tangible impact on Indian economy, where they are actually running the business, they have a lot of diaspora working in these countries. As long as Indian economic interest is not heard, the diplomatic steps alone, for me, they are meaningless.
Right. Dr. Homa Bakai, as Brigadier Salim Butt just mentioned, that this gives Pakistan a diplomatic advantage. But what is the scope of such, let's say, diplomatic overtures, initiatives? We have handed over the dossiers, but it's a realist world. When it comes to sharing the intelligence, US has a pact with India now, the BICA agreement. US is going to give India real-time intelligence and information. Of course, if India would like to use it against China, they can also use it against Pakistan. In a realist world, what is the importance and scope of these dossiers, and how are they helping Pakistan?
You're absolutely right. It's a realist world, and there's convergence of interest, and there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, but only permanent interest. And right now, there is a very strong convergence of interest between Washington and New Delhi, and I don't think the change of government is really going to make much of a difference. But having said this, I would also like to put on the table that the agenda that Biden government has identified for itself is a return to multilateralism. And they also want to restore the moral, ethical high ground that US enjoyed in the global arena. To restore that, I think they cannot completely discount to whatever is happening in India or in Palestine. Right. And more importantly than that, just by saying that our narrative is not important or this is not going to make a difference, you can't leave a vacuum out there. You have to have your narrative, your point of view, which is now, by the way, based on tangible evidence to be put there, because that's what matters. It is about pitching your story. It is about doing a diplomatic offensive. The Brigadier Saab rightly pointed out that India has been playing mischief on Pakistan's territory for ages now. It started in 71 and now they openly acknowledge dismembering Pakistan or being partners in dismembering Pakistan in 1972 and their role in creation of Bangladesh. But right. Have we mounted a diplomatic offensive where we give India a taste of its own medicine? India had conveniently pitched to the world that Pakistan is a terror sponsoring state. And because we were not that proactive diplomatically, that narrative started selling. India's story was something which everybody was buying. It was being used as a whip for Pakistan. So I think it's high time that we put in our point of view, our perspective right there in front of the global leadership and in multilateral institutions to make sure that something is being done. And if something is not being done, then we have done what we needed to do, and we need to continue to do that. Because you see, what is happening in Kashmir is genocide. What is
Right.
happening in Palestine is genocide. And either you can have an attitude like Trump and say that Biden can't do anything about the continuity of Trumpism, and that is why he will allow the slaughter of the Kashmiris and he will allow the slaughter of the Palestinians the way it was being carried out under Trump's leadership, or he is going to restore the ethical, moral, global leadership role for the United States and do something about it. I mean, that is a choice the US has to make. And more importantly, I think the equation is changing. The rise of China is going to impact how conflicts are viewed in the world. I personally think that India has had a taste of its own medicine in Ladakh.
Right.
And China has exercised strategic restraint, but at the same time, China has drawn some very deep red lines and have sent some very important messages, not just to the Indians, but to the global community, that you do not mess with our interests in this region. So
Right.
I
Right.
personally think that Pakistan is on the right side of law. We are not saying things which are figments of imagination, the way the Modi administration does. We are giving tangible evidence of everything we are saying. It is supported by this very important dossier. If the international community chooses to ignore it now, then the verdict of history will tell who was on the right side of things.
Right, right. Mr. Hamid, talking about these developments that are taking place regionally, globally, US probably is going to keep some sort of presence, military presence in Afghanistan. And if it does, what would be the situation in the future? And keeping this thing in mind, the BK agreement and the strategic alignment of US with India, what would be the implications for Pakistan?
Thank you very much, Tamur. I mean, if we talk about Afghanistan, the situation, I mean, Trump is very much eager. He was always eager to, to withdraw all the troops from Afghanistan. But as you know, Prime Minister Imran Khan and Pakistan Foreign Ministry have said few times that they don't want the U.S. military withdrawal like in the past when they left us in the after Soviet war, and we were facing all the mess for like next 10 years. So I think there should be, or there would be, a little bit presence of U.S. troops until and unless the Afghan government and Afghan army would be able to handle and would be able to control the entire Afghanistan itself, which is highly unlikely because, as you know, over 60% of the Afghanistan has gone under control of Taliban already. So, which is a very critical thing. And the way Trump wanted to pack up from Afghanistan is not very I should say wise, because Pakistan has supported all the way through the dialogues with Zalmay Khalilzad. Pakistan has assisted them in Qatar, here in Islamabad, in Kabul. But Pakistan's stance is very clear that Pakistan wants a peaceful Afghanistan without interference by India, and Pakistan wants a tangible action against India and Indian terror camps in Afghanistan. I mean, can you imagine there are 18 consulates of India in in Afghanistan, which is unacceptable. There is not a single example like that anywhere in the world where a country has a 17 or 18 consulates running, and everybody knows that what is the aim of those consulates, what are they doing, and why they are all on the sides of the Pakistan border, I mean, on the Durand line. This is all, I mean, world has to understand that. And secondly, I would say that Joe Biden has experience, in terms of Afghan war practically more than Trump, because at the time between when Obama was there and he was vice president, he was more, as Obama has written in his book as well, that he was more, contributing towards Afghan war than anybody else. whether it comes to the actions in Afghanistan, whether it was the matter of drone attacks,
Right.
whether it was pressurizing Pakistan for do more in those days. But now the situation is changed. Pakistan has its own clear stance. Pakistan is willing to help America to come out of Afghanistan. Pakistan has been helping. Prime Minister is very clear. But the
Right.
only thing is, Pakistan does not want it at the stake of its own security. Pakistan wants its security must be, protected. And Pakistan, as we were talking about this dossier, I mean, Pakistan has clearly told to the world that what exactly India is doing and
India is right.
what is the state-sponsored terrorism. This was
Right.
a
Right.
typical example what India was doing against Pakistan using our neighbors. I mean, it was a clear-cut case against India, and world needs to understand. One more thing I would like to mention, Taimur, that on 25th of November, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has sent a letter to the President of, United Nations Security Council as well, where he has
Right.
clearly, again pointed out Indian government's cunning activities, fascist activities in Indian occupied Kashmir, where they are trying to change the demographics again, and they are
That's
they
right.
are constantly
Mr.
working on
Hamid,
it.
we are going to come to
Yeah.
the Kashmir point in a while. But before that, Brigadier Butt, talking about Afghanistan specifically, new administration in the White House, do you think that the new administration, Joe Biden, uh, would address Pakistan's concerns in Afghanistan? Because this is not something new. We have been bringing up this issue for the last 10, 12 years almost now. TTP operating in Afghanistan, and now there are Jamatul Ahrar and Hizbul Ahrar for that matter. Do you think in future, looking at the developments regionally, US would be in a position to address Pakistan's concerns in Afghanistan?
Taimur, in my view, Hamid Saab gave very candid views on Afghanistan, and I agree with his assessment. But as regards your question, whether Joe Biden and new administration would do something to address Pakistan concerns, I think they need to keep an eye on the bigger picture that India now stands as a regional strategic ally, the leading strategic ally against rising China in the Indo-Pacific policy that U.S. adopted. And it is a policy that is followed by the U.S. administration, irrespective whether the Republicans are there or the Democrats are there. Because previously, as you know, the same policy was initially named Asia Pivot Policy. Then Obama changed the title and called it Asia Rebalancing Policy. And when the Trump came, they called it Indo-Pacific Policy. And now they have a mini NATO there with 4 members. So when it comes to Afghanistan, and if Biden continues to follow the dictum of ending the endless war and getting away from Afghanistan,
Right.
perhaps you were right in pointing out there is a possibility that the administration, and I say more Pentagon or Langley prevail upon, they prevail less upon Trump, but they would definitely have more leverage on Biden, because Biden is called the establishment man. So administration always wanted to keep some residual forces strong enough to take care of the bases. But let me also say, when U.S., ISAF and NATO had more than 150,000 troops, this security situation in Afghanistan wasn't better than what it is now. So it is not the number of troops on ground that would make the difference. The difference would only come when there is a real reconciliation between the installed or the sitting Afghan government, whether yesterday it was Karzai and now Ashraf Ghani. Both were brought in by the Americans to take care of their interest, not the interest of Afghans or Afghanistan. And they miserably failed. They cannot protect the 4 walls of their own palaces within Kabul. So Taliban, as pointed out Mr. Hamid, already control more than 60% of Afghanistan in the last 18, 19 years. So with every passing day, they're becoming stronger and stronger. So if there is a sudden, complete withdrawal, definitely the vacuum created would not be good, neither for Afghanistan nor for the neighboring countries. And, whenever there is a civil war in Afghanistan, Pakistan becomes a main victim, because all refugees, they start crossing the border. And that is why Pakistan is sealing Pakistan-Afghanistan border for multiple reasons. One is the drug trafficking, the human trafficking, and all of the bad things that have been happening. So Pakistan has been working on this for a long time. But Biden, as your question, I don't think he can do much about it for two reasons. One, the capacity issue, and second is the intent issue. They would not try to do anything that would annoy India. And they are standing on the Indian side. So let's be very clear. They are not going to do anything that would help us anyway.
Right, right. Dr. Homa, so this dossier, primarily which is about India, also puts up a big question mark on the security situation in Afghanistan, the way Afghan government is handling it, and also a big question mark on the US presence in Afghanistan. I mean, these forces are there, but the Indian officials, the diplomats who were mentioned by the DGISPR and Foreign Minister, the Indian army officials for that matter, they are openly operating from Afghanistan. So what about the cooperation between Pakistan, Afghanistan and US? What do you think about that?
You see, I'm not surprised by any of this. And when we decided to become facilitators for the peace process in Afghanistan, all of these ground realities existed. And one of the biggest problems that were identified, or the pitfall that was identified for the peace process to move forward, were the spoilers. And naturally, when you have a 40-year-old conflict, it is not going to go away overnight by initiating a peace process or bringing them to the negotiating table. So this is the initiation of the process and a realization on all sides that we have to find a political solution to this conflict. But at the same time, where the Afghan government, the Pakistan government, perhaps the United States, other peripheral powers are looking for a peaceful solution to this very long drawn conflict, there are powers that have invested in conflict and they benefit from conflict. There is an economy of war that is going on in Afghanistan. There are drugs, there are arms, there's also, some people say, even human trafficking. So all of these factors need to be factored in before we move towards a peace process. What is perhaps important is that very important stakeholder, which includes the Afghan government, which includes the Taliban, which my fellow speaker just said, perhaps control more than half of Afghanistan, are on the negotiating table and want to find a political solution for this long drawn conflict. I think that is an important step forward. Abdullah was here and I met him, and one of the things he said was that it is about seizing the moment. So it is about seizing that moment. And what are our choices, Taimur? Pakistan suffers from a direct fallout of a deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan. So we have to invest in peace. We have to bet on peace, expose the spoilers, and every serious commentator on the security situation of South Asia, whether in the West or even in India, categorically says that you cannot decouple the situation on our eastern border and on our western border, which essentially means that the peace in Afghanistan is hostage. Peace in Afghanistan, peace in South Asia is hostage to one protagonist in the region or its behavior, and that is India. So you see, it is also in American interest to at least restrain India from brewing trouble in Afghanistan if it is interested in acquiring peace on the ground. If it wants to withdraw those forces, especially at a time when Biden says that I cannot allow a security vacuum to emerge. So it's a very, very complicated security matrix that is being played out there. I think the situation in the Middle East is further complicating the security matrix in South Asia, in Afghanistan. And we have to see that who is going to win. Forces that are pro-peace or forces that are invested in the continuation of conflict. A good thing is that an important player in the region, which is China and Russia, and don't forget, it was China and Russia that initiated the dialogue with Taliban. It was much later that United States became a part of this process. So we'll have to see that how this diplomatic footwork and the situation on the ground unfolds, and it is more the onus is on the Afghan government and
Right,
the
right.
Afghan people. Do they want peace, or they want this continuity of uncertainty on their land? And spoilers will always be there because they have invested in conflict. India had created a situation in Afghanistan. We used to talk about strategic depth in Afghanistan at one time. What India has created for us in Afghanistan is deep strategic vulnerability. And we need to fight not to not to allow them to induce a strategic defeat.
Right,
That is my point on the table.
right, right,
So
right,
we
right.
need to work hard. We need to convince the Afghan government, which we are. We continue to exercise restraint, promote trade, promote other factors, confidence building measures to bring Afghans to this independent conclusion that what do they want for their land, and will they allow their land to get exploited by the
Right,
spoilers? And
right,
at the
right.
end of
Very,
the day, that is going to take the peace process forward.
right. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Mr. Hamid, I'll put your question and then we'll take a break. Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Kabul recently, and this visit was very important in terms of diplomacy, I would say. What is the impact of this visit, Prime Minister's visit to Afghanistan at this point, while we are discussing the security situation in Afghanistan, while we are discussing that we handed over the dossiers to, at the UN. Also, we brought up this issue with the Afghan ambassador for that matter. In these times, Prime Minister's visit, official visit to Afghanistan, how do you see it? And then we'll take a break.
Yeah, Taimur, I mean, this visit was very significantly very important, and I would say the timing was very good. Although people were saying that this is like after almost, since he is in power and this is his first visit, it looks like it took some time. But the thing is, the Pakistan, I'm always optimistic with the situation. Whatever India is doing, whatever our enemies are doing, we have to see what good is coming up for Pakistan. Let me see. One thing that Pakistan is managed to throw out India from the all peace process dialogues when about Afghanistan, and this was a big success of Pakistan in terms of diplomatic success when India was very much upset about the fact that they are having no role during the any peace talks in Afghanistan between Taliban and America or intra Taliban or intra government dialogues. So this was very good success. On the other hand, Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit was very important, that he has pointed out that there is a lot of potential for increasing the bilateral trade rather than doing that smuggling and rather than all illegal activities. Pakistan could have become a very good trade partner with Afghanistan, and it would bring prosperity for the both countries. And Imran Khan, Prime Minister Imran Khan, was very much, comfortable while he was talking with President Ghani about the issues and about the issues, upcoming issues after the withdrawal of U.S. troops. And this is very important. Again, Prime Minister Imran Khan was very clear with his mission that he has pointed out that the war was never solution. War is never solution. But when Pakistan talks about TTP and other terrorist organizations who are, trying to sabotage peace in Pakistan, Pakistan cannot compromise on that, and this was the main point made by Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to in Kabul. And this was very important, and this was taken very seriously by the Afghan government as well. Whereas Pakistan is willing to help, Pakistan's been helping, whether it was matter of refugees, whether it was matter of for the trade, for whatever. Pakistan's been helping Afghanistan for the last 40 years. This is the time when Pakistan want to have draw some lines in terms of trade, in terms of activities, in terms of terrorism is coming from there. Pakistan cannot afford. Pakistan achieved.
Right.
Pakistan army and other forces have achieved peace with a very high price. We have paid over 70,000 lives for the peace in Pakistan. Pakistan cannot afford any kind of activities in Pakistan, and we have seen what happened in last
Or
2-3 weeks ago. There
that's
was a
right.
layer of activities. So Pakistan is enforcing Afghanistan government to cooperate with us.
Very interesting. We'll take a break, and after the break, we are going to discuss about Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi at OIC. He's attending the 47th session of Foreign Ministers meeting of OIC, and there are a couple of points that were raised up by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, and there was the agenda of OIC. We are going to discuss about Islamophobia that was on the agenda, OIC's agenda and also Pakistan's agenda. When it comes to Islamophobia, we see a rise of right-wing politics globally. And Islamophobia has also become a big issue. Of course, not a new issue, but this is an issue that has been there. And Prime Minister Imran Khan himself also raised up the issue of Islamophobia several times on different platforms. This also seems to be an important element of Pakistan's foreign policy under this government specifically. We're going to discuss about OIC and also Islamophobia and the regional developments and changes taking place in the Middle East. UAE has formalized its relations with Israel, talking about Islamophobia and all these developments. After this break, stay with us. Welcome back. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is in Niger attending the OIC's foreign ministers meeting. Islamophobia is on the agenda, Kashmir, Palestine and COVID. These are the four issues that are being discussed by Pakistan at OIC, and OIC generally is discussing it. OIC Secretary General discussed about Kashmir. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi raised up the issue with the Secretary General of OIC. Yesterday, in the opening session, Saudi Foreign Minister and the Turkish Foreign Minister, they also raised up the issue of Kashmir, and this is certainly a development for Pakistan, for the OIC as well. Since at OIC we are discussing about the issues faced by the Muslim Ummah, by the Muslim countries, these issues are important. Brigadier Butt, talking about these issues, first of all I'll talk about Islamophobia, and as I mentioned before the break, that Islamophobia is a concern for the OIC and also for Pakistan. And if we look at few Muslim leaders around the globe, I would say, Prime Minister Imran Khan is one of them, President Erdogan of Turkey for that matter, Mahathir Mohamad. These leaders have been talking about, specifically about talking about Islamophobia. How do you see this issue at OIC and Pakistan taking up this issue at OIC and at UNGA for that matter? Prime Minister discussed about this.
Thank you, Taimur. It's a very important issue. I think the rise of Islamophobia in the recent past, if I track it back, it started in India from 2014 when RSS and BJP representative Modi, who was known as Butcher of Muslims in Gujarat, became the Prime Minister. So with his rise as the Prime Minister and RSS coming into power and then progressing to these many years from 2014 onward, we have seen a lot of Islamophobia in India. And when Trump came into power, he was again just raising the same slogans. I hate Muslims. I have concerns about Islam, and he has hundreds of statements against the Muslims and Islam. So within America, we saw this phenomenon of Islamophobia taking a lot of traction. And then that was followed up in Europe, in France, in UK, in Denmark, the creation of caricatures and all this stuff. You know, so when we have the populist leaders who are far-right extremists, they are the ones who are responsible actually for creation of this phenomenon of Islamophobia. But let me also refer to the spirit of Islamophobia, clash of civilization. We all have studied. But remember when George W. Bush Jr. was the president, and I think it was Iraqi invasion. So slip of tongue, he said it's the renaissance of the old crusades, you know. So in the heart of their hearts, the clash of religion, whether it was the Muslims versus Jews or Christians, it has always been there. So it is just matter of diplomatic avoidance of such kind of parlance and openly stating that. Otherwise, I think wherever, what we have seen in the Middle East in the last 10 years plus, starting from Afghanistan, the complete destruction of civilization in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen, in Sudan, we have seen the death of more than 60 lakh Muslims in these countries. So this is the massacre, much bigger massacre than we had seen anywhere else. But Muslims are not united. So that is why we, as Muslim community or Ummah that we tend to say, we have suffered a lot all over the globe. Whether we are a diaspora and in some non-Muslim countries, we are suffering there. But even within the countries, those Muslim countries which were very established, like Syria, like Iraq, like Libya, they were self-sufficient in every respect. But all of them perhaps some nuclear aspirations. And that is why Gaddafi and Saddam were made an example all over the globe. The whole global media was showing their assassination. I would also refer to General Ziaul Haq being killed along with his associate. Again, when he was trying to be talking as a Muslim leader, the global Muslim leader, he was taken out. So this phenomena, Islamophobia, it is becoming more pronounced with the rise of the populist leader, especially in America and India, and say now in France. We are seeing this phenomena. So it's a global Muslim responsibility of every single Muslim, not only the states, that we have to work as individual and collectively in order to show interfaith harmony. We have to make sure that our actions, individual or collective, speak louder than our words. But the states have to do much more to arrest this tendency. When the Muslims are suffering in some non-Muslim countries, then the Muslim countries led by OIC have to do something tangible in order to make sure that those countries feel the pinch, the economic pinch, in order to mend their ways.
Right. Very interesting. Dr. Huma, so new changes globally, Muslim Ummah, as we call it, we officially use this word, Foreign Office uses this word. So the issues of Muslim Ummah, of the Muslim countries all over the globe, times have changed. There are new issues coming in. There are new political dynamics in Middle East, for that matter. UAE having better relations, diplomatic relations with Israel, for that matter. So there are new challenges and there are new opportunities as well globally. But when we talk about Islamophobia, as Brigadier Butt just mentioned, this is a big issue, and Prime Minister Imran Khan has himself personally raised up this issue at various platforms, and he's personally, I think, pretty much concerned about it. Few months back, 25 members of European Union, they were invited by the Modi government to Indian occupied Kashmir, and they visited Indian occupied Kashmir. Most of them, the European Parliament members, they belong to the right-wing parties of Europe. So there is a very interesting connection between European far right and the Indian far right, RSS and Shiv Sena. These challenges and Islamophobia as an issue, what is the collective, let's say, response, Muslim world's collective response to Islamophobia, and Pakistan's role in it?
Well, I think it is Islamophobia, but I think it's overall xenophobia. The world has experienced UK went for Brexit. We are seeing a world where walls are being raised. Trumpism has been unleashed in the United States. So after 1908, maximum number of Americans came out and voted. Biden has won the elections, but it also tells us that over 7 million people voted for Trump. And the society is still extremely polarized. And it's not just United States that is polarized, it is the West that is polarized. So the rise of intolerant leadership and its popularity is what is worrisome, because it's the populism of Trumpism, it's the populism of Modi's, leaderships like Modi's, and it's the populism of right-wing leadership in Europe that is becoming a source of worry, because they say that new liberal values have never been under this kind of attack. They say it has never been in this kind of attack in decades. They say new liberalism is on its knees, and that is why we need to restore liberal values, we need to restore multilateralism, and we need to restore order. You see, the world that we're living in is about disorder. It is not just confined to Muslims. It is all vulnerable sections of the society that are being exploited. And the COVID situation has exacerbated the situation. So the inequalities are increasing and the vulnerable are at risk. Islamophobia is a very small component of it. We, of course, feel bad about it, and we've raised it at And we continue to say that freedom of speech cannot be selective. It has to be not ignore the sensitivities and sensibilities of a huge section of people who live on the face of this earth. But I think it's not just about Muslims, it is about all minorities. It is about all vulnerable groups. And the rise of this kind of leadership is so I think the Muslim world should come together with those who are fighting for liberal values, not just to promote and protect Muslims, but every single vulnerable section of the society. It's in India, it's not just the Muslims. It is also the Dalit. It is also other minorities. In the recent riots in Mumbai, the Sikhs had come out and supported the Muslims because they felt vulnerable too. And that is true for Europe also. So it is the blacks in America, it is other minorities in Europe, and of course it is also Muslims. So I think the problem should be seen in the larger context of where ethical, moral values in global leadership are on the decline, and populism is to embrace. So what we need to discount is the tyranny of majority. Democracy was about inclusivity. It wasn't about majoritarianism. It wasn't about majority trampling the vulnerable and the minorities. That
Right.
needs to be addressed, and the problems of the Muslims will also get addressed.
Right. Mr. Hamid, so talking about these issues, when we talk about Islamophobia, this is a principal stance, Pakistan's principal stance on the issue of Islamophobia. We care about the plight of Muslims anywhere. We care about our values as well. I'm repeating, Prime Minister Imran Khan himself has raised up this issue at UNGA. He has raised up this issue on different platforms, in his TV interviews for that matter. Now at OIC, we are bringing up this issue. So even our stance on Palestine and Kashmir also, becomes very strong when we talk about Islamophobia and these issues. How do you see these 3 points primarily, Islamophobia, Kashmir and Palestine, being discussed by the Pakistani Foreign Minister at OIC, and the collective stance of OIC and its impact globally?
Thank you, Taimur. Taimur, I would say that when Brigadier Saab has mentioned George Bush Senior, about his comment about calling it crusade during the Iraq War, that was a very prime thing which he has mentioned. Islamophobia is like a threat, and it has been taken as a threat by the Western world for the last 40 years. I'll tell you an example. In late 80s, when USSR was fall down, and a journalist asked from Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher that the Cold War is finished, so the world is going to be peaceful and all that. And you know what she replied? She replied, the Islam is still there. So can you imagine their Islamophobia since last 40 years? And then we have seen a prime example last 2 weeks ago, when there was an attack in a church to a priest, and without any investigation, without any going into any details, all over the world they started calling the person Muslim and everything, and later on it became a personal issue, and the killer was Christian. And then this is the examples what Western world is doing to the Islam. Prime Minister Imran Khan is very clear, and I should appreciate Prime Minister Imran Khan's stance, Tayyip Erdogan's stance. They are trying to make the world aware that they have to come out of Islamophobia. This is the most important thing. And when they will attack on our religion, whether it is making whatever they did in France, or whatever they did in Norway and Denmark, there will be a reaction from the Muslims. There is no question that any Muslims will tolerate disrespect of Prophet Muhammad SAW or disrespect to our religion. So it is very wisely pointed out by Prime Minister Imran Khan when he said that if the world is not allowed to talk about Holocaust, if you don't allow us to talk about what happened with Jews during Second World War, this is again a sensitive issue for the Muslims, and world needs to come out of Islamophobia. And yes, there is no doubt that it is our Brigadier Sahib was right, that this is our collective responsibility to eliminate all the people's whatever their perceptions about Islam. They need to understand the real spirit of Islam, where it is a religion of peace. It does not even allow to kill you a fly. So how can they can make a religion, how can
Right, right,
they suffer from Islamophobia? One
right.
last thing, what do you think when the world is blaming everything for Islam, to the Muslim countries, everything was blamed to the Muslims. There was a reaction from the Muslim countries. There was some wise sounds. People talk about that. People
Right,
said
Mr.
that
Hamid.
do not blame the religion. Do not blame the religion. There might be some misdirected people who has done something, but religion should not be blamed. And yes, I think
Right.
Trump or rightist elements have badly affected this Islamophobia, and it has made it worse. But I think with Joe Biden, whatever he claimed during his
Question.
election campaign for the Muslims, I believe that it would, as far as America is concerned, it would become bit less strain for the Muslims.
Right, right. My last question to Brigadier Butt. Brigadier Butt, talking about Islamophobia and this issue, we have seen the way some Gulf countries have formalized their relationship with Israel. That also brings in the debate on Palestine once again. And Pakistan has drawn an analogy between Palestine and Kashmir. What is our stance and what should be our stance on primarily these two issues, Kashmir and Palestine, in the recent circumstances? How do you see it? Briefly, please.
I think we are running short of time, but let me quickly say that recognition of Israel by UAE and by Bahrain, Sudan, and there are rumors, although denied officially by Saudi, and a lot of pressure on Pakistan. Israel would have never felt so strong, with so much strong grip on Palestine, on the Western Bank, on the Gaza. Jerusalem declared and accepted as capital of Israel, and U.S. shifting its embassy there. So it's a sponsorship by Trump with his Jew son-in-law Jared Kushner sitting in the White House. Only few days left. So they are in a lot of haste to make sure that as many Muslim countries in the Middle East, they recognize Israel, so that Israel becomes the leading policeman to take care of the American interest as they execute the thinning out from the Middle East and Afghanistan. But then they have strong Muslim countries having strong relations with Israel to take care of their interests in the region. But talking about Palestine cause, I think it is badly impacted by whatever the Arab countries have done. And likewise, officially, as I have read in the media, on the 47th agenda points, the Kashmir issue was not there. Although our Prime Minister made sure that he talks to the Secretary General, Dr. Yusuf, he did talk about Kashmir, but it was never there on the OIC agenda as per my knowledge and information that I have read. Not discussing Kashmir, is something of grave concern for Pakistan, and Pakistan has to make its diplomatic maneuver, the media maneuver much more stronger in order to make sure that the Kashmir cause does not get diluted by enhanced friendship between the Arab countries and India and Israel. So both Palestine and Kashmir issue must not be allowed to dilute because of the shifting of sand that are taking place in the Middle East.
Right. Brigadier Butt, thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show. Dr. Huma Bakai, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Hamid Al-Mashriqi, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.